Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, you've got the privilege of talking to Claude today. Claude's an individual where a friend, Lauren Smith, who you might know from Night Callers Bigfoot Radio, recommended that I reach out to Claude as he has some very interesting stories to share. So I'm glad we were able to be connected that way. But welcome, Claude, to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It sounds like you've had a lot of things happen in just the last few years, and I'm really interested to hear what you've experienced over those years.
Okay. Like a lot of people, Patterson Gimlin was my exposure to Bigfoot. When that film came out, when the Arkansas Magazine article came out, I was all wrapped up in that. Of course, I was 16 years old, still in high school, couldn't do much to go investigate on my own, and thought like everybody else did, there in Washington State, I can't make it up there. Well, we hunted on a 23,000 acre lease, deer hunted, rabbits, squirrels, whatever. And this is right on the banks of the Mississippi River, north of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And as far as I was concerned, the only thing in those woods was deer, rabbits, squirrels, an occasional skunk, maybe a bobcat, but nothing any more ominous than that. You know, big cats, no bears that I knew of. Maybe an occasional wild hog, but that was about it. We were up there hunting one weekend, and the older guys were playing cards and drinking beer at night in the camp. We had 5 different camps on that 23,000 acres. And one of them was actually 5 miles away down a gravel road. And one of the other younger guys that in the camp didn't want to sit around and watch them play cards either. So we struck out walking. And we didn't take a flashlight or a gun. I had a 6-inch blade hunting knife on me. That was it. It was a moonlit night. We could see where we were walking, and we're walking down a gravel road. It's kind of hard to get lost doing that. So as we were walking, probably after about a quarter of a mile, maybe a half a mile, we could hear something walking off in the woods beside us. And we'd stop and it would stop. We'd walk and it would walk. And we started discussing this. What is that? It can't be a cow, because there were some wild cows out there. It can't be a cow. They're not going to follow you. Might be a dog, but if it's one of the hunting dogs, he's going to come out looking for something to eat if he's been stuck in the woods all day. And we just kind of played it down like that, started walking. Whatever this was walking with us again, but it didn't have a 4-footed walk. It had a 2-footed bipedal walk. You could hear this distinct treading of these, And a couple of times we'd stop and it would take one extra step and then it would stop. We'd start walking and it would start walking. So I stopped and took my hunting knife and I cut off about a 6-foot-long sapling and put a really sharp point on it. My friend says, "What are you going to do with that?" I said, "If something runs out of the woods at us, I'm going to stab it and run, try to keep up." Well, at that point, it stopped following us, which I thought was kind of odd. Did whatever this was know what a spear is? It wasn't one of the guys from the hunting camp, because they'd have jumped out long before that and made us wet our pants. Okay. So we walked all the way back to the 5 miles to the back camp, walked all the way back up, and never saw anything else. About a month later on a local radio station, I hear a DJ talking about a tugboat captain on the Mississippi River scanning the banks with a high beam, high intensity light just to make sure he was where he wanted to be on the river. And he reported seeing this extremely tall black creature walking on two legs, leaving the riverbank and going off in the woods in the middle of the night. This was right about the area where we were walking that night. So then and there, I figured out, yes, we do have Sasquatch down here. Now, did I go back and look for him again? Nope. I was busy thinking about school, thinking about girls, thinking about cars and everything but Sasquatch. Didn't have enough money to go roaming the countryside looking for him. Once I got out of high school, like everybody else, I went to work, I got married, started raising kids, and that pretty much consumed the next, well, having 3 children, 10 years apart, it took up a lot of time. And in 2019, I was retired and looking for something to do. And I went online and started looking to the BFRO website for Sasquatch sightings. And I found a number of them in central Louisiana. So that's where I headed out. And found a campsite up here near a couple of dead-end roads, which is what I was looking for, something not very well traveled. And I started walking the woods and looking for tracks, looking for signs. And I did this similar to a way I trained a wild squirrel to eat out of my hand over a couple of weeks. I always wore the same clothes, dark pants, light coat, white hat, gray backpack, to where I looked exactly the same anytime I went walking, looking for Sasquatch. So they would know it was me on sight. They didn't have to worry about, it being somebody they didn't know or whatever. And as I walked, I would talk out loud. I'd tell them, hey, I'm out here to see you. I'm not going to hurt you. I mean, no harm. I don't want you to harm me. But I would like to see you if you would like to come out, let me see you. And I did this both verbally and mentally. Just in case they could read thoughts. I had heard that. Okay, let's try it. And I would walk sometimes 5 miles. And one of the roads that I walked was 2.5 miles long. And I would walk all the way to the end of it, starting out about 7 o'clock in the morning. And at about 9:30, I was at the end of the road. I'd eat a snack, turn around, walk back, get back to my vehicle about noon, a good 5-hour walk. And on one of these walks, there was a bush, most of the right of way next to these logging roads, so this is what they were. The tree line was a good 30 or 40 feet away from the road on either side. There was a ditch in between for drainage and all this. And at one point on one of these roads, there was a bush about 20 feet from the edge of the road. It was drawn over the ditch and getting close to the road. And as I walked by it, I heard this mumbling sound behind the bush or behind me. And it's, I was like, the heck was that? And I was turning around and looked back and thinking it might have been Sasquatch. I said, okay, I heard that. Say it again. And I waited and I heard this something sound. I said, well, to you too. And I turned around and kept walking. I didn't know if I wanted to know what was behind that bush because I had heard there was a young black bear in that area. Didn't want to come face to face with a black bear. Didn't know if it was Sasquatch doing this. But I figured if it was Sasquatch, it was going to follow me. Well, sometime later, as I walked out, if something caught my attention, I'd do a short video with my camera. It was a standard camera with a video mode, So I would do a video and go back and look and see if I could see anything in the area that caught my attention. And indeed, I did find a young black bear that was probably sitting 100 yards back in the woods one day, not that same day, but at a later date. staring at me walking down the road. So thinking back, there may have been a bear. Well, I started finding footprints and different odd things. Oh, found one very large, wide footprint, long and very wide. And I was told by a tracker that that was a double bear track. They'll put their front foot down, and then the back foot on the same side will step at the end of that front foot track and make a very wide toed track that is exceptionally long, but it'll have a pointed heel. Unlike a Sasquatch, it has a rounded heel like we do. And my investigations continues from there. I don't call myself a researcher because I don't take notes. I don't write anything down. Everything is in memory or photographs. If I find a track, I'll put some way of measuring it down, a dollar bill or whatever, put my foot next to it, take a picture of it. I went down one road that I hadn't been all the way down, maybe about 3/4 of the way down one day. This was early and probably in June of 2019. And I found this area about an acre square with saplings, sweet gum saplings that were bent over, touching the ground. All over this area. There must have been 30 of them in this acre of ground, as well as larger sweet gums that were chewed off on one side, almost like a beaver had done it, but there was no beaver in that area. You got kind of curious about that. Well, I'm going into this area and looking around, I found what I call stick glyphs. It'd be a 3-foot long stick lying there with 3 shorter sticks touching it, evenly spaced about a foot apart. Not something that typically happens in nature. I found a perfect X about the same side, 1 foot long pieces of wood, perfectly crossed in an X, laying not too far from that first glyph. And in this area, it was covered in pine straw and sweet gum leaves. And if you've ever walked in the woods and hunted in the fall of the year, you know how noisy that can be. Well, there were pathways crisscrossing this acre of ground back and forth that were probably about a foot wide, wider than a typical game trail. Deer don't make wide tracks like that. And if you walked on those tracks, it was completely silent. If you got off into the uncompressed leaves, it was extremely crunchy, which gave me another line of thinking. Have these Sasquatch been in here that much playing? This was a place that a child would play and bend trees and do things like that. And out of curiosity, I grabbed this sweet gum sapling that was probably about 1.5 inches at the bottom and decided I was going to pull it down and see if it would stay down. Now, that's not easy. That little sapling didn't want to give up. But I finally managed to get enough of a grip on it and put my weight on it and get it to bend down and touch the ground. And I held it there for 2 or 3 minutes. And when I let go, it stood straight back up again. So it makes me wonder how they were bending these trees. Were they slightly breaking them in their grip to make them stay bent over? These are large trees. Some of these things are 4 or 5 inches in diameter. So the thought of breaking something like that to make it stay bent over is a difficult thought. And I had gone in and out of this place a couple of times, and I had my own little secret spot where I would sneak in there that was marked by a broken branch on a twig on a little bush around the edge of the road. I broke a twig off and let it lean sideways, pointing back in there so I would know where to go in. And right after I did that, as I was walking in, there was probably a 5 or 6 inch sapling laid directly across that trail, parallel to the road, almost as if it was saying, "Don't come in here." So I looked at it. I said, "Okay, I think you did that. I don't know that you did that. I don't even know if you're paying attention to me, but I'm going to ignore this. I'm going to come in and walk and look and investigate like I always do. And if you don't like it, you can come run me out. Well, nothing ever happened. A few days later, I go back in there, and there was a second one broken over at the end of this first one in a straight line parallel to the road. And I said, okay, maybe this is another accident. I found out later the bottom of these had been chewed off on one side, which makes them weak and easy to break. But the fact that they were broken off in a line was rather curious. Next time I go back, there's a third one at the end of the second one. I said, okay, you've made your point. I won't come back. And when I went to find my little twig pointing back to where I wanted to go, it was broken below that in the opposite direction, about 2 inches down, as if to say, your marker's no good, stay out. I took that as gospel. I didn't go back in there. I left the place alone. It had been disturbed by the road being cleared by a bulldozer, which hadn't been done probably in about 5 or 6 years. It was well grown up before I went in there. They cleared it 2 days before I started walking it. Well, later, I decided I had never seen the end of this road, so let's go walk to the end, wherever it is. About 1.5 miles down, there was a pond on my left. The road came to an obvious end. You could see where the bulldozer had stopped clearing. And I got my camera out and zoomed it out as much as it would go, which is like 50 power, 1,200 millimeters in photography. And I scanned around the edge of this pond looking for deer tracks, turkey tracks, whatever. Didn't see anything that caught my eye. And still facing sideways to the road, I turned the camera off and I let it hang on my backpack. When I did this, I saw something move out of the corner of my right eye. And when I looked around, there was this 7 foot tall, I'm guessing at this, just by knowing what it looks like when a 6 foot tall person takes a stride. It was over 6 feet, but I'm not going to say 8. We'll leave it at 7. It was coal black. It was looking at the ground as it walked, and the back of his head, or what would end up being the top of his head when he's looking down, came to a perfect point, just like a football. That, quote, typical pointed head that everybody refers to. And as it walked, like I said, it was looking at the ground. It was leaning forward slightly, and its back was as straight as an arrow. There was no curve right above the buttocks. It had it stood up straight, there may have been, but leaned over like it was, there wasn't. What was most notable about the whole thing was the way it walked. It picked its feet up, heel first, like we do, but when it went to put them down, it put them down flat, not heel first. Anybody that wants to know, if you step heel first in anything breakable, it's going to break. It's going to make noise. If you want to sneak, you put your foot down flat, and anything that breaks is under your foot and it's muffled. So this creature looked like a 4-year-old child trying to sneak around and get away with something. But I happened to turn back around the way I was going and ended up watching it make 3 steps off into the woods. Well, I quickly walked that way to see where it went. I couldn't find any tracks because the ground was hard as concrete. It's September, it was dry, hadn't rained in a month, and I never could find out where it went. So I just gave up, headed back to my van. I would go down there again later. And I talked to a man down there running a bulldozer one day. They were clearing where they could start logging in that area. And I asked him if they'd ever seen anything peculiar down here. He said, "You mean the big guy?" I said, "Who?" "The big guy." "I don't know what he is, Bigfoot, Sasquatch." He said, "My crew has seen him 3 times down here at this end of the road." So I made it a point of exploring that area, but I never could find anything significant. I think it may have just been passing through, or it may have been watching them because they were down there logging. May, from what I've heard, tend to do that. Well, my explorations continued, and I had 3 different campgrounds that I could stay in. And one of them was frequented on rainy nights by something. Now, these are hunters' camps. In the summertime, they don't have anybody in them. Once hunting season's over with, they're vacant. And it happened to be April Fool's night. It poured down rain that night. And 2 days later, I went to get gas in my van, and there's this handprint just behind the driver's window, about 5 feet off the ground. And the only way that handprint was put there was in the middle of the night in that rain. Because if you tried to rub off the collected dirt and whatever on the side of the van with a dry finger, you couldn't. But if you wet your finger and rubbed it, it would come right off. So this handprint was left in the middle of the night by something trying to look in the window, I assume, to see what I was doing, because they had become very familiar with my van by then. And when it took its hand off the van, it kind of slid down the side of the van, but the middle and ring fingernails caught the paint on the van and literally scratched the paint, which, to my knowledge, is something a human can't do. It didn't dig into the paint. It didn't peel the paint back, but you can see scratches in the paint where his fingernails had got the way down. And it happened again, probably almost a year later in that same campground, same camp spot, because they knew I used that spot. Like I said, they were familiar with the van. And I got up one morning to look around the van, and there's what looked like four fingerprints there, or finger marks on the side of the van. But this time, the one to the left went straight down. The second one went straight down. The third one went straight down. But the fourth one came down about 2 inches and then went all the way across the first 3 and then down. So that wasn't just a drag print. That was drawn on there. Now, what that signifies, what it means, I never have figured out. But I kept my investigations up in that same spot in 2022, I believe. I was sleeping in the back of the van, and I heard just ka-tink, ka-tink, when you bend a soda can and like that clinking noise. Well, I heard this at the back door of my van about midnight. And I'm like, who is out here playing with a beer can at midnight? I figured, Coke can, could be a dog and, trying to get that Coke syrup out, chewing on a can, whatever. I went back to sleep. Next morning, I wake up. That can is laying about 30 feet from the van. So I got out, walked over there to it, picked it up. And when I turned it upside down, clear water came out of it. This was an old can. It had been rained in for a long time. And whatever brought it over there wasn't trying to drink out of it. It was playing with it, bending it and making that little clinking noise, and left it where I could find it. In other words, we came by to visit and we left you a present, which happens quite often. When I first got up here, let me backtrack a little bit. When I first got up here, I didn't know what to do or where to go. But I found the campground that I originally stayed in and sat there in that one spot in the van in April of 2019 and watched the woods day in and day out, looking for any wildlife. Once you park a vehicle, it becomes part of the scenery, and animals ignore it after a couple of days. And I was working off of that. But I never saw anything, any deer, any coyotes, never saw that many birds. I tried to call barred owls because I'm good at it. Never got an answer. But a friend of mine came up, and he is the Bigfoot researcher. And he wanted to go hang a recorder out not too far from where I was parked. So he walks over there and hangs his recorder, and he comes back. He shows me a picture on his phone of this tiny footprint, barefoot footprint, about 3.5, maybe 4 inches long, and about an inch and a half wide. This is a baby foot. Okay. Now, what human baby would be out in those woods in early April when it's still pretty chilly, running around barefoot? I don't think so. But it's kind of tucked it in the back of my mind. Okay, well, maybe there was a female Bigfoot out here with a little one and hanging on to it, whatever. Well, kind of lets that go. And I started doing the owl calls, never got an owl call. Except just before I left that campground, I could only stay for 2 weeks. I had the most. But just before I left the campground, off in the woods, I heard, I'm like, I don't know of an owl that makes the call like that. Barred owls are, okay? That's typical for barred owl. Great horned owl is, none of which matched what I heard. But I thought, there's a drunk out here trying to mess with me. Or, I just kind of left it alone. A couple of years later, I'm at another campground, and I hear that same call. I'm out, instead of walking like I usually did, I just went out in the woods and sat. I said, I'm going to try the hunting technique. I'm just going out and sit and watch. And I got out there about 7 in the morning, which is typical. And probably 45 minutes after I got settled in and quiet and not moving, I hear that same call. I'm like, okay, this is weird. And I called a buddy of mine who's a turkey owner, and I said, if you do an owl call, will a turkey answer you? He said, yeah, right after daylight. After that, you got to use a crow call. I said, okay. Kind of eliminated the fact that it was a hunter scouting for turkeys. It may have been, but no turkeys answered. And this was down in the bottom below me, out of sight, where I couldn't see where it was coming from. This is in the same area where I kept getting my presents. Well, this goes on. I went walking one day down a creek bank, knowing that wildlife frequents creek banks. Deer, everybody, squirrels, they'll have to go for water sooner or later. So I started walking creek banks, and I found a 16-inch long, 8-inch wide footprint on the edge of this creek. Got a good picture of it, did a video of it. That right there, pretty good sized creature. And this track was probably 3/4 of an inch down in this clay bank, solid clay bank. It was covered in leaves, and the leaves had been mashed down in it. So this was recent. This had been done within a week of me finding it. And unfortunately, in 2023, I have COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which means I can't breathe. Well, in 2023, it got serious enough, it put me in the hospital for 14 days. When I came back out, my walking in the woods was over with. Don't have enough breath to do that anymore. But at one time in that area where I found the bear can and the handprints on the van and all this, I was about to walk across, there's a creek that surrounds that area. I was about to cross that creek and walk uphill into a thicket that really got my attention. So, I don't know, a little hardwood thicket. And when I say thicket, you couldn't see through these. If you got down on the ground, you couldn't see more than 5 feet into it. Well, I started to walk up to it. And in my mind, in my head, I heard this mature female voice say, "Don't come in here." And I said, "What?" She said, "Don't come in here." Well, I had a feeling right then, I didn't need to ask why, and I didn't need to go in that thicket. Something left her and kept going. This was in 2022. When I could still walk and do things. And I didn't think about it after that, just kind of let it go. When I got to where I couldn't walk anymore, I called out one day, mentally, verbally, sitting in my van. I want to talk to whoever that was that told me not to come in the thicket that day. And the same voice said, yes. What do you want? I was in shock. Now, I've known all my life that thoughts travel. I read this in the back of a comic book one time. Thoughts have wings. If you look at the back of somebody's head and concentrate, they'll turn around and look at you, especially if you know their name and you mentally call their name. So I knew back then, even in high school, that this worked. But getting words was a little something different. So I asked her, I said, who are you? What are you? And she said, we are the people. The people? I've heard that term used in Native American cultures. Tribes will call themselves the people, no matter what their language. And I thought that was rather curious. And I said, okay, well, where do you come from? And she says, we are not the Nephilim, but we are descended from the Nephilim. Well, I had a vague notion of what the Nephilim was from reading the Bible and watching certain YouTube videos and stuff. And I said, well, do you believe in God? She said, yes. I said, do you worship God? She said, we worship Yeshua, the Creator. I had no idea what she had just said. I'd never heard that term. I grew up in a Christian church, but the term Yeshua was never used. When I looked it up online, it is ancient Hebrew for Jesus. Okay. So they believe in Jesus. They worship Jesus, the Creator. And I said, Jesus didn't create this world. But then if you go back in Genesis, it says, let us create man in our image. So there wasn't one single God person doing this. So Jesus possibly was the creator. This story goes on. I asked her, how do you survive? She said, like every other creature out here, we catch or pick what we eat. We have lots of plants that we eat. We can kill small game. We can even kill deer, which we do when we need to. And this conversation grew. This went on for days on end. Every time I had a question, I would go to her and say, what is this? Or what is this? Or how does this work? She gave me mental images of how they live day to day and family groups. She told me her husband's name, and I say husband because that's what she said. She didn't say my mate. She said my husband. This is a very high-level culture. Now, they happen to live in the woods, but that's by choice. They want no contact with us. None. Because they know what our contact means. So they avoid us. They hide out. And I asked her, I said, what do you need from me? She said, all we need from you and your people is peace. That's it. Just peace. It was all. I said, you don't need clothes when it's cold or some way to build fire when it's cold or things like that. She said, no. We don't want the things you have because we know what it cost you to get those things. You gave up your freedom, and in many cases, you gave up your soul to get the things you have. So we don't want those things. We don't need them. We survive without them. And I said, well, there are places on your body you can't see. Wouldn't you like to have a mirror? She said, nope, that's how I have a mate. Nah. She's got such a wry sense of humor. Not even funny. Oh, And I asked her before she told me, about them being called people. I said, what do you want to be called? And she said, the people. She said, we don't mind terms like Sasquatch, Sabe, the kinder ones that mean forest people or even the hairy people or hairy men. We don't like Bigfoot because that's derogatory. It's pointing out something obvious about our anatomy. She said, what if I called you teeny weeny? And I knew exactly what she meant. I said, okay, you got me there. Like I said, very wry sense of humor. I asked her if, I'm watching YouTube videos. People talk about they do this, they do that, they do the other. I said, can you cloak? Can you disappear? She said, no, we don't have to. What we do is affect your mind to where it doesn't register what you see. If you look directly at us, we'll block your vision so you don't see it. You see everything else around us, but you don't see us. And that says they do camouflage. We had ongoing conversations, kind of hard to remember some of them because this has been a couple of years ago. I asked her I said, what do you do with your dead? She said, we bury them. I said, well, I've heard that y'all cannibalize your dead. She says, no, we don't. Some do, but we don't. And she answered a lot of my questions that way. Are you aggressive? She said, no, we're not. She said, when we bury our dead, we'll put them in a place you can't find them. If there are large rocks, we'll move the rock, dig the grave, put our deceased in there, put the dirt back over, put the rock back in place. And it's a big enough rock to where you would have to have heavy machinery to move it. And we do it in a place where you can't take heavy machinery. Or we'll put them under a tree. We'll pull up a tree, dig the hole, put them in it, put the tree back on top of them, and cover it to where you wouldn't suspect that there was ever anything there but the tree. So they can build fires, but they don't. She said, if we build a fire that makes smoke, you can find us that way. We don't want to give ourselves away. They do have a written language that they use at times. And they don't write on anything permanent. They'll write in the dirt and then brush it away so it never existed. And I asked her about the wood knocks. And she kind of giggled. She said, we do that for fun sometimes. We do communicate with it. If we need first thing in the morning, if we want to let the clans around us know we're okay, we'll wrap a tree just to make a noise and let them know we're there. They'll do the same thing back just so us know that they're there and they're all right. But she said the typical wood knocks that you hear when you're camping are for our entertainment. Because when we hit a tree, if you're out there looking for us, you all get up and run around in circles. And, oh my God, you're entertainment. You're the funniest thing out here. And we are. We're the most inept creature there is in the woods. We trip over our own feet. And the Sasquatch sit back and laugh at us. They think it's hilarious. They toss a pebble. You're sitting there at the campground in the middle of the night, and they'll toss one pebble into the circle where you're sitting. It won't hit you. They're good enough at throwing things. They'll hit what they want to and miss what they want to. And they toss that one pebble, you're like, oh my God, you see that? Everybody gets excited. We do it for fun. Scratching on a tent in the middle of the night. Just as if you're going to do anything. Most of the time you don't. You're laying there scared to death because you don't know what's outside that little flimsy tent and you feel safer in there. Their legal system begins with the alpha male over his family. He settles arguments and he'll bring you to task when you do something wrong. And if it's serious enough, he'll take you out. Plain and simple. If it goes beyond your family and you do something to another family, the head of that family will bring you to task. And if it goes beyond that, the local clan leader will take you to task. They have a system of judgment. It's very precise, very fair. They're the most forgiving creatures in the world. And for us to come in and do what we've done to their woods, yeah, they have to be. I asked her when we got in conversation, I told her about the one that I saw that day. And she said, yeah, I know. You know? She said, yes, that was my son. And I kind of studied. She says, he was in training. He has not yet come into his own, but all their lives they're trained to do different things. And he was in training as a watcher. That is what the young males do. They watch the woods. They report back to the head of the family or the head of the clan to let them know what's going on. And they can do this mentally without ever leaving where they are. That's how she talked to me, was mentally. They talk to each other like that. But when I described this child, listen to me. She said, yeah, that's my son. I said, what was he doing? She said, he was practicing following you. You kept calling out to him. He could hear you, but he wasn't going to acknowledge you. But when you stopped and looked backwards where you had come from, he thought he had a chance to sneak across the road in front of you, and you happened to turn around and see him. And yes, that posture, he was sneaking. He was walking quietly. And had you not turned around, you wouldn't have known he was there. And we do this all the time. You need to watch behind you occasionally because, like the deer, like the coyotes, if you're traveling down a road in a car, walking, whatever, we will wait till you go by and your attention is away from us before we cross behind you. And I said, okay, you tell me this is an adolescent? He's not quite mature. She said, no, not yet. I said, how big is his father? She said, half again taller, meaning half of his height on top of his height, which makes the father somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 feet tall. And I shudder to think what they could do if they wanted to. If you met one in a bad mood, you wouldn't stand a chance. I don't care what you're carrying. 10 feet tall and probably in excess of 1,000 pounds is a lot of force, and they are incredibly strong. Oh, I was sitting in my van one night with the side window open, and I have a squeaky toy. It makes a loud squeal. It's a dog toy. And I was held it up against the window, and I would squeeze it like this long, and I'd make it sound like it was getting beat up, eaten over, whatever. We used this for calling coyotes when I was little. And I did this a couple of times and put it down. And when I looked at the back window in my van, there's a divider bar between the two back doors where they're closed, metal frame. And together from each door, probably about 8 inches wide total. Well, when I looked up at that back window, there were these two golf ball size glowing red objects. And when I say glowing, they almost looked like they were on fire. It may have been its breath rolling up out of its nose and creating a mist or something. I don't know. But these two eyes were at least an inch farther apart than that 8-inch divider. So those eyes were about 10 inches apart, which means the head had to be 12 to 14 inches wide. Think about the size of that. That's bigger than a basketball. And that was staring in the back window of my van, trying to figure out what that squealing noise was. And luckily, I didn't have anything in that van that looked like it was being abused in any way, shape, or form, because I had the lights on inside the van, and he could see me in there. And I looked off for a second and looked back up. It was gone. He satisfied his curiosity. But I guarantee you those red eyes were a very intense emotional state that he was in. He was ready to kill something if he needed to. I've heard about eye shyness, yellow, green, blue, and red. And I think it's kind of like a mood ring. The more intense their emotions are, the closer they get to red. The blues, the yellows, the whites, they're very placid, laid back, peaceful. I've had time to think about all of this. I live in a van in the woods. I have for 6 years. I'm by myself, and I'm not afraid of anything. I used to walk these woods with a 5-foot hiking staff and a sharp fixed blade knife, and that was it. And I would walk for hours and never once felt threatened by anything, including Sasquatch. They were very peaceful for the most part. There are clans that are not. There are clans that are vicious. But the ones that I've met, I've had no problems with. The mental thing I found curious in all communications. They use that at long distance. If they need their mate, they need one of their children, they'll call that name, come home, and the child knows where to go. Okay? Once they are at home, they speak to each other verbally. They use their language because their language doesn't carry very far like their thoughts. When they put the thoughts out, it's like going on the internet. Everybody can hear that. So they're very careful what they say mentally. They also have a form of writing that they don't want to speak. They can write things. Now, do they have to mentally picture what they're writing? Yes. Does that go out on the web? I don't know. Maybe they can block that. But like I say, the mocking is long distance. My friend and I was sitting out there in the woods one day, and we heard 3 different knocks. One south of us, one north of us, and one west of us. Right behind each other. By-yow, by-yow, by-yow. And then we heard this major roar that they were gathering. The alpha males were gathering. For what reason? I don't know, but I wouldn't want to be the focus of their attention. They were taking care of business. I've heard that roar at less than 100 feet. I had parked in a little hideaway spot that I found. When the woods get too full of smoke, I can go here and park and be out of the smoke that bothers my breathing. And I had done that one day. Backed up in the spot, rolled my windows down, just sitting there, playing on my phone. And there's a landfill not too far from there where the garbage goes, and the garbage trucks run in and out of it constantly. Well, about 3:30 in the afternoon, they knock off from work, and these kids, I say kids, young guys in their early 20s probably, families, pickups, come flying down that gravel road like they're running from the devil, but they're racing each other, they're playing. Well, just about the time these 3 trucks came flying by, something, Sasquatch, lets out this roar that went on for something like 10 to 15 seconds. It was so loud, it vibrated the air. You could feel it. I was standing in front of a speaker at a concert. Every time they hit a bass chord, the hair on your arm buzzes. It was the same thing. This creature was really upset. I don't think it was upset at me because I stayed there. I let my windows roll down. He was mad at those young guys flying by in their trucks. Possibly they had come close to running over one of his children at some point in time, and he's still upset about it. I wouldn't want to be one of those guys. I want to go to a landfill. I do want to go over there with a spotlight. One might see what's there. But as I travel around the country, I have family in Oklahoma, and I was driving down the Indian Nations Highway one day, and I can feel Sasquatch and the woods around me when I'm driving. It registers with me. And I could feel this one Sasquatch off the highway a ways, and I reached out to him, and I said, "Good morning." And all of a sudden, it felt like the top of my head was going to explode. The most painful headache wrapped around the top of my head, like somebody was tightening a clamp on it. And this voice comes through and says, "We don't want to talk to you." Male voice, very dominant male voice. And I said, "Okay, I apologize. I won't bother you again." And at that moment, the pressure in my head went away. Can they hurt you without touching you? Yes, they can. I went to a different campground a while back, known for Sasquatch activity. And I announced my presence when I got there. I let them know mentally, "I have come to visit. I mean, you're no one. I would like to interact with you." Well, their interaction was to slowly churn my stomach to where 24 hours later, I had to leave. I felt like death warmed over. And as soon as I drove across the bridge going into that campground, all of that dissipated. If they don't want you somewhere, they can get rid of you without ever laying hands on you, without you even knowing they're there. Because when you get sick, the last place you want to be is in the woods. If they get sick, the first place they want to be is in the woods, because that's where their medicine is. I'm going to stay up here as long as I can. This is January of 2025, and let's say I've been here since April of 2019. It's been interesting. It's been an interesting education, one day at a time. Just paying attention to what's around me, the different little things that happen. I had a small, I'm going to say that the baby that I told you about, the baby track I saw, its mother had been standing there watching me, probably at night. And she put that baby down just long enough to do something and pick it up again. It never took a step. It wasn't a walking track. She put it down and picked it back up. That baby in 2019 was a babe in arms. But it knew she was watching this van, and it is growing up, seeing this van, seeing me in and out around the van, hanging tarps on it, doing things. It's gotten to know me. And I believe it's the one that comes by and leaves me the presents, taps on the window of the van at night, which it did one night. I was in a campground I've got a pop-out window on the side of my van, one of those long sliding door windows. And if you have it open and you tap it, it rings like a bell. Bong, bong, bong. And I told her mentally, if you come by, knock on the van, let me know you're here. About midnight one night, I hear this bong, bong, bong. And I reached around and tapped on the inside of the van 3 times, and I could hear something running away in the grass. She was out there. She wanted to let me know she was here, but I don't think she expected me to answer. And it startled her. The place that I told you I've spent a lot of time and have a lot of interactions with them. I was going there one day and I knew it was going to rain. And I called out to them en masse. I'm going to be in that campground. If you want to come by and visit, just knock on the van. Yes. Needless to say, in the rain, in the wind, in the middle of the night, I thought a tree had fallen across the van. I heard this loud boom. The van shook sideways. I'm like, oh, I've got a tree on the van. This is going to be fun. I'll big limb, whatever. I looked around. There's no broken glass. Nothing's leaking. So I went back to sleep. I'll deal with this when the sun comes up. Well, the next morning, I get up, get my coffee, eat my breakfast, and go out to see what happened during the night. And as I walk around the van, I don't see anything on the ground. Not a stick, not a limb, not a branch. There's no trees that are down. I even climbed up on the back bumper and looked on top of the van. Nothing up there but my kayaks. So I called out. I said, weren't you come down last night? And this young female voice says, yes, I did. Did you knock on the van? Yes, I did. That was her slapping the side of my van. I said, next time, just knock. They 3 knocks. She said, oh, okay. She was going to let me know that she was there. And trust me, I knew. They're wonderful, intelligent creatures. And they need their space. They don't mind interacting with us. As long as it's peaceful, as long as we're not trying to harm them or take over their territory, they're okay. Oh, some more hilarious thing they got. That's about it as far as hilarity. The ongoing communication. At one time, the female's husband got upset with her talking to me and she told me, she started getting distant. I couldn't ever get in touch with her. And I finally got to talk to her one day and I said, what have you been? She said, I can't talk to you anymore. I said, why? She said, my husband doesn't approve. I said, okay, I understand. And I'm sorry. She said, but I can introduce you to an elder from another area that you can talk to. So she did. And I've been talking to him since. Her husband, somewhere along the line, had a very bad interaction with humans. He doesn't trust us for any reason. And I called him out. I said, I want to talk to you. We need to settle this. And he answered me, he said, I don't want to talk to you. I have no use for you. I said, I've never done you anything. He says, well, not you personally, but humans have. I don't trust any of you. And I told him, I said, you can trust me. I'm not going to harm your mother. The one thing that she told me was that as long as you don't give us away and say exactly where we are, where other people can find us, we will talk to you. We will interact with you. Well, he was just the opposite. He said, I don't care what you do. I'm not going to trust you. I said, look, I'm trustworthy. He said, okay, let's say you are. But let's say you get in a circumstance that either one of your children is going to die or you have to lie about something. What would you do? I said, lie. He said, you see, I can't trust you. Extreme circumstance? But he's right. We can't be trusted. They know it. That's why they don't come around. Now, the elder that I talked to told me different things. I asked him the same questions I asked her, a lot of them. Can you camouflage? He said, yes, we can. You can literally change your color. Oh, yeah. Well, she said you couldn't. He said, according to what she knows and what she has been taught, because depending on the family they grow up in, they don't know all that we can do. They would their parents give them certain things that they feel safe for them to do. The rest of it, they don't teach them. So depending on which one of our people you talk to, you're going to get different answers. I said, okay. So let's go out on a limb here. Can you teleport? And he said, that's not what we call it. We call it traveling. I said, but you can do it. He said, yes, when we need to. And he almost went into how when he stopped short. He said, you don't need to know that. I said, yeah, I know. He said, but yes, we can. He said, I said, well, I've done this mentally. I've done astral projections years ago when I was studying in a psychic group, and mentally went somewhere and confirmed the fact that I was literally there because somebody saw me there, but not physically. He said, physically, it takes a lot of energy. And he said, when she told you that we are descendant from the Nephilim. It's true. We have angel blood. Purebreds do. And because of that, we can teleport. We have that ability. Lesser bloods that have mixed with humans cannot. And yes, it happens. They do mix with humans occasionally. And I think that's what the male's problem was with humans. He's not pure blood. He's mad at us because of it. But anyway, the elder says, yes, we can teleport. We call it traveling. And I said, well, how long does it take to get anywhere? He said, if I wanted to go from the West Coast to the East Coast, I would open a doorway. And when I stepped into it, my back foot would be here. My front foot would be there. And as soon as I pull my back foot through, the doorway closes. And I'm there totally. Okay. Said that's okay. I believe if you said that's what you can do, but I would love to see it done. I would love to know how. But he says your mental state is not such that you can know this because you would abuse it. Humans abuse everything. Doesn't matter what it is. Somebody gives you a tool to do something with, to work with, to fix things. Next thing you know, you're going to use it as a weapon. That's the first thing that comes, boy, this will make a good club. I could beat this into a knife. Or you can't be trusted. We have to watch you very carefully. And that is part of our job. We are watchers. We are here to make sure that if we can help it, you don't destroy yourselves or the planet. So it goes on, and it's this rabbit hole gets deeper the longer I walk in it. And I don't take things verbatim. Just because somebody says something is so, I don't get all goofy and go, oh, this is good, No, I've got to prove it. I've got to know for a fact. And in my psychic training years ago, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I spent about 5 years of intense study in the psychic room. And the introduction to that was introduction to what some people call angels or higher souls or guides, different names for them. They are people who have been through this life physically, have mastered one or more things while they were here and moved on to the spirit world. And they return to be guardian angels, if you will, for people that are going through this physical plane now. I know how to contact them, how to ask them questions, even down to the simplest things like, what should I eat for lunch? Or what would be in my best interest, because they'll never tell you what you should do. They can tell you the options of what you can do. Well, I used them to check out what I learned from Sasquatch, and they have confirmed it. Most of it is absolutely true. As long as the Sasquatch are concerned and what they know, what they can share. I'm absolutely satisfied with living out here, even though last night at 27 degrees was a bit chilly. I survived that too. I'm 76 years old. Been around this planet a few times as it spans. Seen the sun come up and set numerous times. I'm hard to fool. And I don't believe intently very quickly. So.
Claude, that's an incredible account of the last few years, but also the years before that. Thank you for sharing that. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about some things?
No, be happy to answer them.
So you had said that you know that some clans are vicious. How is it that you know that some clans are actually vicious of the Sasquatch?
Because they told me there are histories in certain areas where they don't like people. And short of learning about it, they'll kill people just because they enter in the wrong place. They're just that set against us and vicious towards us. There's a mutation called a gugway. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Sure. Yep.
That are very, very vicious. Now, typically, Sasquatch doesn't have anything to do with them. Not the forest people, not the general clans. But the gugway are feared by just about everything now. And with that, there are people who communicate with gugway. They have no fear of them. They've never had a bad reaction from them. So it might depend on the area they're in, their history. I don't know. Can't speak for all of them.
You referred to getting psychic training. Was that through the military, or what was the background of that?
The reference I made to the magazine, comic book, reading about thoughts of trianglings. I was 23 and listening to radio on Sunday afternoon. And this guy comes on, we got some people here that they're psychics and they can teach you how to do this. And so they had my attention right there. You had me from hello, okay? And I joined this group. It's called the Inner Peace Movement. They're now known as Wayshowers Fellowship. They changed their name in 2000, but they have a complete course of study and psychic knowledge, psychic training that can introduce you to your guides, tell you basically what your nature is. There's 4 types of sensitivity to the world. There's feeling, prophecy, intuition, and vision. They can tell you which ones you work most out of. Everybody has all 4. And they go in depth in this, and it just goes on and on and on. Very good program, and it's a self-development program is how it was actually organized by its original founder, Francisco Cole, back in 1964. He died in 2000. And his son has since taken over his place and is now running the movement. But I've learned over 50 years of use that I can absolutely trust my angels to give me the right information and not deceive me or trick me So I use them to validate whatever I find.
It's very interesting. When you've been out in the woods or in any of your campgrounds, have you ever heard anything that sounds like the Sierra Sounds recording?
The chatter? No, I've never. Like I said, the closest thing I heard of the chatter was possibly that mumbling in that bush.
Mm.
Today, I don't know whether it was Sasquatch or a bear, because I have encountered bears that when they get in a pressured situation, they'll pop their gums and growl. And it comes out, blah, 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 blah. So you don't know what you're hearing, If you don't see it, it's kind of hard to figure out what it is. And a friend of mine who lives in Alaska said, yes, they do that. And they will make that huffing sound. Okay. So that may have been a bear. But no, I've never heard the chatter.
It's kind of a left field one, because it hasn't really come up, I think. But do you have any thoughts as to if Sasquatch are involved with cases of people going missing at all?
Yes. I almost sure now. Like I say, it depends on where you are, what you're doing, and what the Sasquatch in that area are like. Typically, it's temperament-wise. They have been known in native culture. Most of the tribes will tell you that over the years, women have been abducted by them. Children have been abducted. And they didn't come back. So did they eat them or did they just take them into their clans? And that may be where the crossbreeding comes in when they, have less than 100% original blood. So yeah, I won't say that all disappearances are, but I'd say quite a few of them. When they find the shoes sitting side by side in the last place and the person was 2 weeks after they disappeared, yeah, I think so.
Sure. Based on what you know, are there places in the US you would not go to try to look for Sasquatch?
No. And I say that because I think if you get in an area where you're not wanted, they'll let you know. Now, being sensitive like I am and knowing how to communicate with them, I feel much safer, like I did introducing myself in that campground recently. Let them know that you're there. Let them know you mean no harm. And you probably won't have any problems now. If you do anything they don't like, problems start. Even the one in the Comanche Mountains in Oklahoma wasn't in a mood. He wasn't in a good mood. And I've heard that about that area. That they don't play. They're mean. So possibly maybe the reason I got that response.
Yeah, I can see that. Many encounters in the Comanches in southeast Oklahoma are pretty intense. There's
Yeah.
so many different ways that people have of trying to go out into nature and trying to get connection. There's everything from speaking your mind, like you brought up, to knocking on trees, to playing sounds, to cooking certain types of food. Do you have any advice as to what might be the most effective way of trying to get a connection with Sasquatch that are in the area that you're at?
Well, number one, they know you're here. You don't have to announce your presence most of the time, although I do it as a courtesy. Knocking on trees, I wouldn't suggest doing that. For one thing, they have a method of signaling 1 knocks, 2 knocks, 3 knocks, whatever. And if you go out there and give the wrong signal, you'll have to just set off the fire alarm and you're going to be overwhelmed with what happens. Oh, the reason I did what I did was to put them at ease. I dressed the same, I moved the same, I spoke softly the whole time. Oh, just as a gesture of friendship. So if you go in the woods, if you're looking for Sasquatch, tell them straight up, I would like to meet you. I would like to see you if possible, or hear you if you don't feel comfortable meeting me. But I'm not going to chase you. I don't have a gun. I'm not going to shoot you. I mean you no harm. I'll come as a friend. And if you do that mentally and verbally, I think you'll be all right. If they don't want you there, you'll know it pretty quick.
If you get in a point where it becomes evident where they don't want you in that area, what would your recommendation be for those people to do in that situation?
Leave ASAP. Excuse yourself. I'm sorry to have intruded in your woods, and I'm going to leave as quickly as possible and do so. If you get, we have an innate ability to sense what's around us. That little feeling in the pit of your stomach that something's not right. That's the best way in the world to judge a situation. You know what I'm saying? If you walk up, I've walked into bars before, just, having a good time. And when I grabbed the door handle, my stomach would turn. I'm like, geez, and my stomach's a little iffy tonight. Well, I get inside and there's nothing going on that you can see, but everybody in there is visibly upset. And I talked to one of the barmaids, like, what is going on? This is a peaceful place. One of the barmaids just went off on the owner and he physically threw her out of here and blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's what I was told. Okay. You know, I picked it up walking in the door. If you trust that, it'll keep you out of a lot of tight places.
Claude, I think that's some great advice. And I just want to say thank you for sharing what you experienced, but also sharing some really interesting thoughts and advice regarding what people can do if they're wanting to try to make a connection themselves. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me on. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I hope that your audience does gain something from this, because I came up here to learn about Sasquatch. I didn't come up here to be a big shot on YouTube. It doesn't matter to me. I wanted to know, and I have found out. That's basically where I am now. I have add-ons every once in a while, experiences, and that I just kind of put them with the others and enjoy it. So thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. You have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list. Number 1, encounters from Franklin County, Texas. Number 2, encounters from the entire state of Iowa. Number 3, encounters from Oak Ridge, Oregon, or the surrounding area. Number 4, any individuals that know about Bigfoot being flown off after the Mount St. Helens eruption. Number 5, individuals that have had a Bigfoot encounter while in the military. Number 6, those that have had a Bigfoot encounter in the southern New Hampshire or north central Massachusetts area, including Franklin County, Massachusetts. Number 7, individuals that have had a Bigfoot encounter in a Bible camp or Boy Scout camp setting. Number 8, individuals that have had Bigfoot try to enter their house forcibly while they were living inside. Number 9, individuals that have actively have a Bigfoot living on their property. And lastly, any sightings that are in the Ouachita National Forest area of Oklahoma or Arkansas. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. I'll see you back next time, listeners. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one. If you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.